When news flashed that the 1919 World Series was fixed, fans were hit with a mixed bag of emotions. Disappointment, mistrust, and ire towards the sport of baseball for betraying the number one rule: you play to win the game. The Black Sox Scandal of 1919 was one of the most infamous events in baseball history, stemming from a conspiracy among several players of the Chicago White Sox to deliberately lose the World Series in exchange for money from gamblers. The roots of the scandal developed well before the first game of the series, beginning with a deep-seated resentment among some White Sox players toward their team's owner, Charles Comiskey. Comiskey was known for underpaying his players and enforcing strict cost-cutting measures despite the team's success on the field. This dissatisfaction created that environment for players to really entertain offers from gamblers seeking to fix the World Series. The idea of throwing the World Series was definitely unheard of, but largely orchestrated by first baseman Arnold "Chick" Gandil, a known gambler with connections to underworld figures. Gandil ended up reaching out to other professional gamblers, including Joseph "Sports" Sullivan and New York gangster Arnold Rothstein, to arrange a deal in which several White Sox players would intentionally lose games in exchange for bribes. Rothstein, one of the most famous, powerful gambling figures of the era, agreed to bankroll the operation, ensuring that a substantial sum of money would be paid to the White Sox players. Gandil recruited several White Sox, including Eddie Seacott, a veteran pitcher who felt particularly embittered toward Comiskey. He was promised a $10,000 bonus if he won 30 games in the regular season, but when he reached 29 wins, Comiskey reportedly benched him to avoid the payout, and so, feeling cheated, Seacott agreed to participate in the scheme, along with other players such as Shoeless Joe Jackson, Lefty Williams, Fred McMullen, Tweed Reisberg, Buck Weaver, and Happy Felsch. These players were promised payouts from $5,000 to $20,000 each, but a distribution of money later became a source of contention. Leading up to the World Series in 1919, the rumors started to really circulate amongst sports writers and baseball insiders, but the sudden and unusual surge of betting against the heavily favored White Sox did raise some red flags. However, the lack of strict oversight in baseball at the time allowed those gamblers and players to proceed with the scheme largely unchecked. While some of the press and within Major League Baseball heard whispers of the conspiracy, there were no actions taken before the series began. By the time it started on October 1st, the groundwork was already in place, and the White Sox players had agreed to manipulate the games to ensure the Reds would emerge victorious. The White Sox players had agreed to manipulate the games to ensure the Cincinnati Reds would emerge victorious. Despite their efforts to keep the fix a secret, inconsistencies in play and continued betting shifts made the scheme increasingly obvious. Though the White Sox lost the series as planned, tensions arose among players when promised payments were delayed or never received in full. These frustrations would later contribute to the exposure of the scandal, leading to a major legal and sports controversy that forever changed baseball. After the miraculous shock of the 1919 World Series fix, one might have assumed nobody would dare to touch the game of gambling again, but only a month back did baseball find umpire Pat Hoiberg to be unfit to umpire for sharing betting accounts with friends. So clearly, not everyone is terrified enough of the reparations. But how did we get here? This was supposed to be the end, the anomaly in 1919. It's not. And why? Well, the sports betting landscape has blown up. Very easy for those like Hoiberg to get involved. Baseball has now fully embraced this sports betting boom since that Supreme Court decision in 2018 to legalize the sports betting industry on a state-by-state basis. MLB and other leagues were once fiercely opposed to gambling, but they have now partnered with major sports books from DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMGM to more. Fans can place bets on everything from the outcome of the game to individual performances. And at this point, betting is now a big part of the baseball experience. Odds now displayed on broadcast and ballpark signage, you just don't get away from it. And it's always interesting, I think, to see what people bet on. Honestly, it arguably gets worse outside of sports, but here's just an interesting few options from a Reddit board recently. One's betting on Bulgarian ping pong matches, another on Ecuadorian basketball. How about German handball, Nigerian hockey, ITF tennis matches, darts, Siberian Little League rugby, MLB The Show simulations, wheelchair basketball, and the Little League World Series. And my man Chili Golf with a 4-leg parlay for an $800 win on Armenian hockey, esports, tennis, and darts. But back to the baseball side, even some of the teams are jumping into the ballpark. I mean, you can bring your action close to the action. Several teams now embrace sports betting with sportsbooks on the stadium property, if not sports betting lounges nearby. The Washington Nationals have the BetMGM sportsbook at Nats Park that opened in 2022. Fans can basically place bets while they're there, and there are no betting kiosks inside the ballpark, but fans can access the sportsbook just outside the stadium. The DraftKings sportsbook is at Wrigley Field. It was announced as part of the partnership there. Illinois law does currently prevent in-stadium betting kiosks, but that would be the next part of this. At Chase Field, the Caesar Sportsbook opened in 2022. There's a full-service sportsbook and restaurant experience adjacent to the stadium. Fans can place bets while enjoying that atmosphere. And over in New York at Citi Field, they partnered with Caesar Sportsbook, which also has a lounge inside the stadium, and fans, of course, can again again, wager through mobile apps as well. And then in Cincinnati, you have a BetMGM sportsbook right near the Great American Ballpark, so any Reds fan can walk in or walk by and place a bet easily before or after the game. So, I mean, nowadays, all you need is a device and some internet, and you could bet almost a limitless number of possibilities for one or many games, and this has led to even more troubles for some related to big names in the game. Just last year, Shohei Ohtani's impersonator got in trouble. Ippei Mitsuhara was Shohei Ohtani's longtime interpreter, playing a crucial role in bridging that language and cultural gap for Ohtani. He had worked with him since his move to MLB and was widely seen as a big part of the transition to the U.S., but Mitsuhara recently became embroiled in a major scandal involving illegal gambling and financial misconduct. Reports indicate that he allegedly stole a significant amount of money from Ohtani's accounts, basically to cover his own gambling debts. That revelation, of course, shocked the entire baseball world, and same with Ohtani and Mitsuhara, who had been considered to be a trusted figure for Ohtani. Of course, in the end, Mitsuhara has now been charged, but many were skeptical about how he was able to gain financial power to Ohtani's accounts without his knowledge, and definitely led to some uncomfortable questions about Ohtani's involvement, though Ohtani has been since cleared of any financial wrongdoing or gambling, and it's been known that he is a victim, according to the court results. But you have to think, without all these sports betting amenities, it would have been much harder for Mitsuhara to go on with this gambling problem. It seems like an easy connection. More sports betting, more gambling issues with those involved in the game, and we are seeing some significant names get into trouble at this point. But even with the A to B connection, that seems pretty easy to make. I'm not sure it's so simple. In fact, I'm not sure the legality of gambling has really mattered at all. The NBA's Tim Donaghy brought several NBA results into question well before the nationwide legality of sports betting. Donaghy was a longtime NBA referee, but he was found to have bet on games he officiated and provided inside information to gamblers, influencing betting outcomes for personal financial gain. The FBI launched an investigation in 2007, uncovering that Donaghy had connections to pro gamblers and was allegedly making calls during games that affected point spreads. Although Donaghy has denied directly fixing games, he did admit to using his knowledge of officiating crews, player tendencies, and league preferences to make winning bets. Ultimately, in 2008, Donaghy pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and transmitting betting information and was sentenced to 15 months in prison. The scandal damaged the NBA's credibility, raising concerns about the fairness of officiating and potential corruption within the league. Commissioner David Stern called Donaghy a, quote, rogue official, insisting it was an isolated case. But many fans have remained skeptical, especially after Donaghy claimed that the NBA influenced refs to favor certain teams in key playoff games. While the league implemented stricter measures on referees and gambling policies, the scandal remains a dark mark on the NBA's history and a cautionary tale about the risk of sports betting. But again, this is all before that big rise in the Supreme Court decision in 2018. And the craziest part about the Tim Donaghy scandal is that it overshadowed another man who was a real legend in the game of baseball, established known as a GOAT well before the gambling nets loosened up. Pete Rose was quite possibly the best hitter of all time, but he's not in the Hall of Fame because of the gambling scandal. It remains one of the biggest controversies in history, and he's the all-time leader in MLB hits, and the former Cincinnati Reds player-manager was permanently banned from baseball in 1989 after an investigation by MLB revealed that he had bet on baseball games, including those involving the Reds, while serving as the team's manager. Though Rose initially denied the accusations for years, he would later admit in 2004 that he did wager on baseball, though he insisted he never bet against his own team. Some have obviously questioned if the punishment was unfair, and even President Trump has now jumped in to potentially pardon Pete Rose at some point and clear his name of wrongdoing as he's just passed. But you do wonder why Rose would do this, and well, according to him, he won a lot more games than he lost betting on his team, and like Donaghy and Hoberg, he of course had quite the inside scoop being in the Reds clubhouse every day. So while thousands of players have had this access, Rose was one of the few to cross the line. And with these incidents all in the past, we seem to all collectively have assumed that the sport betting landscape has opened up the Pandora's box in the game of baseball, but it doesn't seem that simple. The 1919 Black Sox Scandal showed us that those with the most to gain would be willing to risk what they do have, and that principle has remained true. From the lower-paid umpire Pat Hoberg to NFL players that must make their millions in just a few years, greed consumes those who are desperate for a little bit more money. This drive will overcome a lot of obstacles, and the 1919 Black Sox faced the most scrutiny and dishonor of any, more than others who do this now with the expansion of sports betting. But it was the first time the grand game witnessed a heinous fix, and yet they still went ahead with the plan. So it does seem pretty easy to think that this modern sports betting landscape has actually changed how the teams, players, coaches, and officials are going to behave in the future, and more will get in trouble. And maybe that's the case, but maybe not. As we've seen from the 1919 Black Sox and those getting in trouble for gambling right now, most of the same people are culprits, and they bring the same type of story. Legal or not, the financial greed of the chance for gambling profits will get to a certain few people every once in a while, and as we learned from the 1919 Black Sox to 2025's Pat Hoberg, the more things change, the more they have stayed the same. Thanks everyone for watching. Be sure to check out all the social media on screen and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Of course, feel free to leave your opinion in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Hope you make it back for the next video.